Everyone has a story. What's the story that you're telling about me right now? Does it change when I do? How do I best get you to listen to my story? Will you pay closer attention to me when I'm dressed provocatively? Perhaps in a way that makes you lean in. But then, what of my credibility, my reputation? Once I have your attention, will you actually listen? Will you hear my message? How do I best get you to believe my story? Am I more convincing now that I'm dressed more like a professional? I spend a lot of time thinking about the stories that we tell. How rare it is for us to consciously craft our own. To think how our age, our race, our gender, even how the clothes we wear affects how we tell our stories. And certainly how they're heard. Perhaps sometimes even if they're heard. How does the story that you're telling about me now change when I tell you that I'm a PhD or a CEO, or that I definitely don't need these glasses? Here, do you mind? Thanks. Do you hear that voice in your head? The one that's telling you that my words might carry more value, that I myself perhaps have a bit more worth than the woman who pranced out on stage in that red dress just a few minutes ago. And what was her story? Like everyone, I carry many stories that I myself have not consciously crafted. Stories that have been handed down to me from legacies from my evolutionary history, my culture, even my family. The majority of those stories I share with most of you watching. One in particular, I have the misfortune of sharing with one in every third woman here. That's this one. I am the victim of sexual assault. There's just one problem with this story. See, it's not true. I've never been the victim of sexual assault. I am, however, an adept survivor. And there's more to this story than simply changing a few of the words. See, in reality, my behavioral and physiological changes allowed me perhaps even to survive at least one of my assaults. And the likelihood that that happened to you as well is probably fairly high, although you're likely unaware of that. Because I am also the member of a very little known statistic, 70%. I am one of the 70% of women who during her assaults did not scream, did not fight, and did not try to run away. One of the 70% of women who experienced an unlearned involuntary response. Like a deer in headlights, I froze. Now, it isn't as if I hadn't had self-defense training. And it's not like I don't have a voice. I am honestly, seriously, I've never ever in my life been described as quiet or small or weak. And yet, in those moments, on those days, my body betrayed me. It betrayed the story that I wanted to tell, the one where I responded appropriately to my attacks. See, as women, we're taught to fight, to scream, to run away, and yet in the moment of our attacks, 70% of us will be rendered physiologically incapable of doing any of those things. So this may seem a little antithetical to our survival, but let's consider the alternatives. During a stressful encounter, we're pretty familiar with the fight or flight response. But this is an incomplete picture. See, women are tough. Ronda Rousey? Boy, never want to mess with her. But even the toughest of us would probably be flattened by the likes of Muhammad Ali. And women, too, are really fast. But the very fastest woman on earth is still significantly slower than the fastest man. Which means that fighting or fleeing are probably not the best reactions to have under these circumstances. So millions of years of evolution has come up with a third alternative for the stress response arsenal. Freeze, cooperate, appease, and try to reduce bodily harm. A recent study of college-age women uncovered a rather disturbing corollary. When these women were made to feel uncomfortable
by an interviewer asking them highly inappropriate questions. Things like, you wear bras to work? Or, do you find yourself to be sexually desirable? The women not only sat and answered the questions, and by the way, didn't report the interviewer, but they did so with a smile on their faces. A smile. Why on earth would a woman who is feeling uncomfortable smile? For the same reason that she would freeze. Evolution has written the most successful survival strategy, and it looks a whole lot like grin and bear it. For evidence of this, we need to look no further than to our closest primate relatives. When chimpanzees are made to feel uncomfortable or nervous with one another, they pull their lips back and they bare their teeth in a grimace that looks remarkably similar to our smiles. This gesture is given most frequently by low-status individuals as a sign of submission in an attempt to reduce the physical violence against them. And yet, what is it that a male counterpart, human, might read when he sees a female so struck by his charms that all she can do is sit and smile at him? How you doing? And unfortunately, that's not where the misinterpretations end. Because what are the stories that we tell about these women who have experienced the freeze and smile response? Well, she must have wanted it. She wasn't fighting. Look, she was smiling at him. And these are the same stories that poison the victim's own mind. All she can do is sit back and think about those stories. It's no wonder that women who experience the freeze response show nearly triple the rates of PTSD and are more than 3 times as likely to show signs of severe depression. All they can do is sit back and think, why? Why didn't I scream? Why didn't I fight? Why didn't I run away? When in reality, her body was responding exactly as it was supposed to. And there's nothing she could have done to override the survival response in that moment. It would be the same as if I told you not to blink when I throw a piece of paper directly at your face. See, we are all masterpieces of evolutionary programming. And in a cruel twist of biological irony, when a woman experiences the freeze response and she survives her assault, the brain records that as a success. And so the likelihood of that happening again only increases. Why isn't this a story being told? When millions of lives have the potential to be saved, why isn't this better advertised? It's a frustration that as a professional speaker, I take really personally, because I can't seem to scream loud enough or to run from state to state fast enough with this message, or to fight my own personal battles publicly or bravely enough for any changes to happen. It's as if our entire nation is at once experiencing a collective freeze response. And in light of the horrors of the sexual assault epidemic, all we can do is sit immobilized, frozen in time, with a grimace on our faces, hoping that the pain will pass quickly. I think it's time we begin to tell a better story about sexual assault. In every other crime, we seem to be able to clearly delineate where the lines of responsibility should be drawn. From an early age, we're taught that theft is wrong. And when burglaries do occur, we don't turn to the victims and say, well, maybe next time if you just would have fewer nice things, this wouldn't happen. So why, when we look at the statistics around sexual assault and we see that 90% of the assaults committed against women and 93% of the assaults committed against men are enacted by men, why aren't we empowering men? Why is only 8% of the educational programming around sexual assault targeted at men? See, I don't think that the sexual assault epidemic is a women's issue. To be fair, I don't think that it's a man's issue either, or a gender non-conforming issue for that matter. I think the sexual assault epidemic is a biological issue. It's an issue around the subconscious stories that aren't being told, like the freeze response in women, and this one for men. Males, you are biologically wired for sexual overperception. This means that you think that girls are into you a lot more than they are, and a lot more frequently than they are. And by the way, if this hasn't happened to you, think again. And that's just because, energetically, sperm is really cheap. You guys are producing billions of those every single day. And so, biologically, it's far more costly for you to miss a potential mating opportunity than it would be for you to push a girl who's not into you just a little too far. And this is a story that we reinforce in our culture again and again. We socialize young men early on to ignore rejection and relentlessly pursue whatever it is that they desire. It's become a major theme in movies. I don't mean to ruin an entire genre for you, but have you ever looked at the rom-com genre? When you start to explore the underpinnings, it's very difficult not to hear a slightly more vicious tone. Take, for example, the 2005 hit, Hitch. Will Smith opens with the following monologue. No woman wakes up and says, God, I hope I don't get swept off my feet today. Now, she may say something like, now's not a good time for me, or I just need a little space, or my personal favorite, I'm really into my career right now. You believe that? Neither does she. You know why? She's lying to you. You hear me? Lying. It's not a bad time for her. She doesn't need space. Now, Will Smith, if you are listening, which I really hope you are, you have the responsibility and power to be telling a better story. And his responsibility and power does not take away one bit from the responsibility and power of each of us in this room here today to consciously craft a better story. Millions of women are suffering with the false belief that they did not do enough to deter their assailants, while millions of men aren't armed with the educational programming that could prevent them from becoming perpetrators of sexual violence. It's time we break the mold. It's time we break through the stories that we tell about how men and women are supposed to act. To break beyond our subconscious programming that holds us hostage in our own bodies. It's time that we consciously craft a better story. One that not only demands our attention, but commands our ears to listen and our voices to share. And I thank you all in advance for your power of continuing to share this story. Thank you.